Have you ever sat in a meeting, maybe the first one as a new manager, and thought, what the hell am I doing here? And to be honest, I have. And I still remember the first staff meeting I led as a new manager. I was completely unsure of myself, desperately hoping no one would notice how much I dreaded it and how I felt. And if you ever been promoted into a leadership role without being given a real playbook, you're not alone, believe me. And that's exactly why this episode is so important. So first of all, hi. And if you don't know me, my name is Limor Bergman Gross, and the podcast is From a Woman to a Leader. And in this podcast, we go beyond job titles. We talk about real stuff. We talk about what it takes to grow, influence, and lead as a woman in tech. And for those who don't know me, I've been in tech for over 20 years. I started my career as a software engineer, grew into leadership, and 5.5 years ago, I left corporate to start my coaching business and fulfill my mission to support women like you in their careers. So if you are trying to climb the ladder, or maybe, trying to chart your own path, this show is here, and I'm here to support you. And today we're diving into something that I think most people misunderstand, and it's called facilitation. And what I mean by facilitation, not as a tool to run meetings, but as a powerful leadership skill. My guest today is Therese Miclot. She's a leadership consultant and co-author of The Facilitation Advantage. And she's someone who knows how to turn everyday moments into opportunities for clarity, confidence, and connection. And we talk about how to shift your inner dialogue and stop sabotaging your presence. Why great leaders ask better questions instead of having all the answers. By the way, this is one of the common challenges I see with a lot of women leaders that I coach. And also we talk about how to tailor your message for executives versus peers or maybe subordinates. And last but not least, why flexing your presence is key. Not faking it. So if you're ever doubting yourself, if you want to lead with authenticity and influence, and not just survive meetings, but transform them, this episode is definitely for you. So are you ready? Let's dive right in. Hi, Therese. How are you?
Hi, Limor. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you here today. Super excited to talk with you today. And we are going to talk about facilitation skills. And before we dive into that, first, tell us what is it? What is facilitation skills?
Such a good question and a good place to start, because there isn't one universal definition. You'll find many different definitions. But when my co-author and I went to the root of, well, what does facilitation by definition mean? The Latin root is to make things easier, to reduce friction. And I really love that definition, because I think that for most of us in leadership roles, that's one of our priorities. Make it easier for team members to accomplish their work. Make it easier for us to show up with more influence and credibility. Make it easier to overcome just obstacles. Make it easier for people to buy into our idea. Mm-hmm. And so when we think of that definition, it's not reserved for professional facilitators or trainers. In fact, I think it is essential leadership skills.
Wow. So let's kind of talk about, first of all, no one teaches that, right? I mean, facilitation is nothing that is being taught at all. Yeah. And, I just talked to 2 women I'm thinking to do a collab with last week, and they said, "Oh, have you took group facilitation training?" I said, "No, I've never done that. I mean, I'm open to learning it."
Yeah.
But it's like thinking about it, like we never learn it
We
anywhere.
don't. It's true. And I think also for those of us that are subject matter experts or domain experts in an area, whether that's tech or finance or sales, whatever, we often are building our careers based on our technical or domain knowledge. And then when we have to become leaders or we get promoted or we're leading teams, even informally, now we have to rely on an extended set of skills and not just our technical skills. And so that's where facilitation skills comes in. And we try to make it really easy for leaders by breaking it down into really a set of skills.
Mm-hmm.
And they fall into three categories. So there's mindset, and so much of how we show up in high stakes moments or in any moment, in any meeting, in any conversation is about what we're saying to ourselves and the values that we hold and how they translate into our behaviors. And so mindset and having the self-talk that supports you is one component of facilitation. The next is content. And of course, oftentimes you're in important conversations or meetings or you're about to get promoted because of your subject matter expertise. But the trick is that the higher you rise, the more you have to have capability to know how to tailor your message. So for instance, I was working with a very, very technical, brilliant person, and his struggle was that when he would be introducing his ideas or, teaching his technology, he didn't know how to frame it differently, whether, if he was with the board of directors or if he was with other data scientists or if he was with the CEO who may not have the same depth of technical knowledge. So how do you understand context as a way to frame your message in a way that will resonate with your audience? And then the last set of skills we call them process skills, because they're how you get groups and people from one point to the other. So things like presence and story, how you use story as a way to convey information that makes it easier for people to understand and follow along. How you adapt for impact when you get an unexpected question. What do you do? When as much as you prepared, you get a curveball, so to speak. How do you react to that? Or you sense from people they're really not bought in, although they're not saying it. And so process contributions or skills help you know how to extend your choices moment to moment, no matter what comes your way.
Okay, that's wonderful. So let's talk with mindset, because I think mindset is like so important. I talk about it all the time. So
Me
think
too.
about it. Like when I was starting managing,
Mm-hmm.
I felt I had no idea what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I had no clue what I was doing. And I remember walking into the first staff meeting and thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah. That is so relatable. And I bet everyone listening to this is like, what? Me too. I feel like it's universal. What did you do?
Oh my
So
God.
that often isn't going to help you show up with confidence or credibility. So
Uh,
how did you change the way you talk to yourself to be able to show up with more confidence?
yeah, that's first of all, I'm sure that in the first few staff meetings, I didn't show up confident at all. I mean, I felt very incompetent, and I felt like I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know what I did? First of all, Therese, I realized I needed help.
Mm.
I realized, okay, no one gave me a handbook,
Yeah.
and I really need help. And I think one of the first things I did, I ran to my manager and said, like, teach me what am I doing? And
Yeah.
so I think just realizing that maybe you need some help, that help can come in the form of your manager.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me, it wasn't the case in this scenario because he was very busy. It
Mm-hmm.
could be some mentors. So look for mentors within the company or people that you know.
Yeah.
And that's what I did eventually. I had a mentor that I met every time that I faced something I had no idea what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one is the coach,
Mm-hmm.
like myself, like
Mm-hmm.
find a coach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is the right thing for you? I mean, it depends on the situation. Back then, I really needed someone who's been there, done that,
Mm-hmm.
that can help bounce ideas with to see, am I not crazy like for thinking something like that? Does it
Mm-hmm.
make sense? Because a lot of times you talk about mindset, like if I am a manager,
Yeah.
and in my mind, I don't see myself yet there, right? Maybe I say, oh, I have no idea what am I doing.
Yeah.
So I doubt every decision I make.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
need
I think
someone to give me, yeah, go ahead.
you're of when you can't get out of your head and you're ruminating and you're repeating that to yourself. I love that idea, and I think it's a really important one. Find a mentor, find a trusted advisor, find someone who can just have you pause and question yourself. Is this true? I mean, so I think the next thing you can do is build the skill and be able to help yourself in the moment. So, for instance, one of the things that you did that I coach others on is pause and get curious about what you're saying to yourself. So when you say, I don't belong here, or, they're going to find out, I don't know what I'm doing, then you can just pause and say, okay, is that true? Is it objective? Um, because it may not be objective, or you can ask yourself, well, what else might be true? That, okay, I don't have all the answers, but no one did when they started, right? Like that's true. Or what else can you say to yourself that would support the way you want to show up? So
Yeah.
I've had this as well. I was in a, situation where I was given this opportunity to have some visibility to some very senior leaders. This was earlier in my career. And as I was getting ready for it, the voice in my head said, they're going to think you're an idiot. You've never done this before. Because the reality was I had never done this project before. And so I knew that would not help me, right? As I walked into this big conference room and basically looked at a bunch of men, I knew I wouldn't show up the way I wanted to. So my fix was to say, okay, so that's true. You've never done this before, but what else is true? And what I arrived at is nobody is perfect. Nobody is expecting perfection. And I'm going to tell my story. I'm going to tell the story of this project. And that was enough to turn the dial down on my nerves and my anxiety. I mean, of course, I was still nervous, but instead of it being at a level 10 of anxiety and nerves, it was more at a 2, because then I was like, well, I have a story to tell. It's my story, and I'm excited about that story, and as opposed to, they're going to think I'm an idiot. I've never done this before. So I think the bottom line, what I would encourage your listeners to know is that it is a skill. It's like learning to ride your bike or cook, and you can develop it. You can kind of pause for a second and examine, is this helpful? Because my guess, I bet for both of us too, we'll say things to ourselves that we would never say to our
Yeah.
friends, right? About our friends. And yet we'll say some really disparaging things about
Yeah.
ourselves to ourselves.
We are our worst critic. I
Oh
mean,
my
that's for
gosh.
sure. That's for sure. I
Yeah.
have an advice. I mean, what I like to say to my clients, think of yourself as your best friend.
Yeah.
It comes to you and say, oh, I have no idea what to do when I walk into this meeting. What would you tell her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think that especially as women,
Yeah.
we are helpers and we
Yes.
really want to help others. And if we try to think as, what would I do if this person, like Therese, was my best friend? What would I tell her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Probably I would tell her something that is very encouraging, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that, two things can be true at the same time, right? That yes, you don't have all the answers. You are still in learning mode. And boy, you learn really fast. Like you've tackled other difficult things before and you found a way. right? That's true as well, right? Or they put you in this role because they believe you can get there. That's also true, in addition to you've never done this before. And
Yeah.
so I think the thought of like two things can be true at the same time. And then I'll say the last thing that I often coach people on is when you get in your head like that, you're very internally focused, and you're caught up in you, how you are perceived. And the reality is, like, most people are not looking that close at you. They're thinking about themselves.
Yeah.
And so if you can lean
That's for sure.
to, it's not about me. It's not about me right now. Like, I'm going to really pay attention to the conversation, or I'm going to really listen and learn, will often get you from being internally focused to show up in a meeting more curious, more insightful, asking great questions. By the way, sometimes when you're in learning mode, and actually even when you're an expert, one of the highest value things you could do is ask really good questions. Sometimes it's not about, the smartest, person in the room offering the smartest idea. It was the person who asked a really good question that drew it out.
Yeah, I think in many cases it's about asking the right questions rather than knowing all the answers. Because as a leader, usually, or in many cases, especially like in my case when I was a leader of technical people, I was not expected to be the smartest person in the room or to know all the answers,
Mhm.
rather than to ask the right questions.
Mhm.
And especially those questions that make people pause and think.
Right.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive because we often think, like you said, like, I should say something smart, right? Like, get a word in. And, or I work with a lot of women who say, I had this thought, but I didn't say it. And then 5 minutes later, a man said it. And everyone's like, oh, what a good idea. What a good question. And so we're not helping ourselves in those situations. And if you can lean to, I'm going to listen deeply and ask a really insightful question that breaks open this conversation, you are showing up with a great deal of credibility.
Yeah. And I would say another thing is that we, a lot of time, as I said, we tend to be very critical on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we don't know. We think that people expect us to have all the answers, but
Mm-hmm.
it's usually not the case. And also, other people don't have all the answers. It's not like everyone knows everything.
Right. Right. No, how could you possibly?
Yeah,
So we hold ourselves sometimes to a standard that's unfair and not even achievable.
exactly. So Therese, let's kind of switch into the next one, into content. I think you mentioned something that I really resonated with, especially with technical leaders. Like, we give the same message, or
Mm-hmm.
we say these things in the same way that we used to do
Yeah.
when we were just individual contributors, when we were just doing the work.
Sure.
And we don't learn how to adapt and how to speak the language of the audience.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, how do you kind of help others
Mm-hmm.
to adjust their messaging or the way they communicate to the
Mm-hmm.
type of the audience?
I think the first thing is, if you're getting ready for a meeting, and I think we tend to focus mostly on the words, right, of what we're going to say, or the slides, the deck. I would encourage you to change the priority of your preparation to stepping in the shoes of the audience. So if you're going to be presenting an idea to the senior vice president, let's say, or the CEO, you have to be thinking about, okay, what does the CEO care about? What do they need to know? How do I put this in context that will make sense for someone who is operating at the 50,000 foot level, not on the floor? And so I think that's a skip step for most of us. And here's how I see it. So the CEO asks you a question, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, it seems like a simple question, but I have 10 ways I can answer that. And we tend to over explain, offer more complexity than needed.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the reality. If the CEO wants more detail to go below the surface, they will usually ask.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is like understanding the context you're going to be operating in and who is your audience. What do they need? What are they motivated by? And then being able to tailor. And sometimes that means, my standard deck is 15 pages. With the CEO, it's going to be 1 page and it's going to be bullets because they just want the top line. If they need the detail, I'll have it, but I won't lead with it. And
Exactly.
so that would be my number one tip is start with, what do I know about my audience? What do they care about? And if you don't know, this would be, again, go to a mentor, go to, your leader that says, what do they care most about? What are they thinking about, or how is this in context to other things that are happening in the business?
Yeah, and there is what you mentioned about knowing your audience. I think this is very simple, yet so many people miss that because we tend to think about ourselves. So, oh,
Yeah.
this is what I want to present.
Yeah.
Oh, those 15 slides. I'm in love with my slides and I'm in love with my
Exactly.
diagrams, and that's what I want to present.
Exactly. And really, if you are able to take very technical concepts and distill it down to its essence so that, a stakeholder would understand, person that doesn't come from a technology background can understand it, we actually appreciate and hold those people in higher esteem because they can take something complex and translate it in a way that is meaningful to us, and then we know what to do with that information.
Yeah, for sure. What else would you suggest?
Um, let's dip into one of the process
Mm-hmm.
skills or process contributions, and that is engaging with presence. And the our angle into presence is a little unique because I don't see it as a do or don't. So when you're trying to show up with credibility and confidence, executive presence, for instance, I think the old way of thinking of it is you're supposed to dress a certain way or don't say things or say things. And I think it's much more nuanced than that. And my co-author and I talk about it in the frame of status behaviors that our ancestors, when we were first walking the earth as human beings, we were looking for signals that would tell us, oh, that person is worthy of our followership because they'll keep us safe or they'll keep us fed or they'll find shelter. And that is still wired in our DNA. And what that means for us today, as women in particular, is that we have choice in terms of how we show up with presence. So for instance, low status behaviors often are, not making eye contact or fidgeting. Or I was just working with someone who tends to touch their face a lot.
Mm.
They're on, the camera a lot. And so they're fidgeting. Another big one for women is that they pre-qualify what they're going to say. It sounds like this. Well, I may not be right, but here's my thinking. Or, we're still, this is a crazy idea, but, and we're already signaling to people without even being consciously aware that we're telling them, don't trust my idea. Or we ask permission. Would it be okay if we move to the next slide now? We're asking for permission. Those are lower status behaviors. Higher status behaviors, of course, would be a bit of the opposite. So speaking concisely, thinking about your posture, being able to initiate conversation instead of wait, making declarative statements instead of, again, I think we should, or maybe it would be a good idea, is to declare instead of, question your own idea. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't think that in every situation, you have to show up with high status behaviors. Of course, the goal is to match behaviors with the people that you're operating with. Now, I'm not talking about mimicking because the goal is for you to be your authentic self, your best
Mm-hmm.
self. But I am saying if you're going to be with a more senior audience, you need to have more higher status behaviors because when you match status, that's when good things happen. Now, let's say you're a tech leader and maybe you're going to have some interns or you have some new hires joining your team, the goal there would be to match status with them because they're intimidated by you, right? You may, you're the most senior technical person on the team. And so the goal isn't to operate one way. The goal is to be able to flex your behaviors. And I saw a leader do this brilliantly. He was a very senior person, and he came into a meeting, and people were all sat up because this very senior executive who just came from a board meeting, suit, tie, and he wanted to make people feel comfortable. So what he did, took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, loosened his tie, and he sat down. So now he's not, even physically above, down on people. And he said things that lowered his status. He said, look, if you think that we have all the answers, I'm telling you, we don't. That's why we hire brilliant people like you to help us really arrive at better solutions. So he was lowering his status in front of this more junior audience. And the benefit of that was, and this often happens, you'll have a senior exec say, okay, do you have any questions? Any questions? And the leader that doesn't flex their status, I saw this too. They said, "Oh, come on, ask me a question. I won't bite. I won't bite." You think he got any
No,
interaction?
probably not.
No, because people were like, "That's intimidating." But
Yeah.
the other leader who matched status with people who were more junior, it became this wonderful conversation because people were not intimidated. He was his authentic self. They were even taking more time than I was expecting. And so that senior leader asks me permission. He says, "Hey, Therese, I know this is taking more time than expected. Is it okay if we go a few more minutes?" He asked me permission. And that's, again, matching status. And so I think the message I'd have for your audience is that the good news for us is that it doesn't mean you have to abandon your principles, abandon who you are. It's about being able to have more behavioral choices at the ready when you're in any situation. And so that you know how I might want to show up based on the audience that I'm with.
This is very incredible, and I absolutely agree with it. I think that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, and your body language speaks a lot of times more than your actual words.
Oh, 100%. Even, we also can raise and lower other people's status without even knowing it. We just talked about raising your own.
Yeah.
But, for instance, I saw this happen. So there was, a meeting in a conference room, and, as people were starting to fill in the seats, one of the, senior women, sits down. One of the junior women sits on the outskirts. And she said to the other more junior woman, no, come up here, come up here. And what she did in that moment was raise the status of that other younger woman who thought, I should sit on the outskirts of this room, not at the main table. Or another way you can raise status of others is, and this is particularly for women, sometimes when our ideas get overlooked. So let's say you say something brilliant, but no one really catches it in the meeting. And then someone else says it 5 minutes later. I could stop and say, wait. I think that was already said, right? Like, or what was your point earlier? And so I could, raise your status, or I can say, you had a really good idea that everybody should hear about. Tell us. I'm creating space for others. And so I think as women, we can raise each other's status, and it's obviously not just even gender specific. I mean, we can do that for anybody.
For sure. Yeah.
But I'm curious about when you've worked with women on confidence and those like nonverbals, where do you tend to focus?
I first go to the mindset because I think that the way you perceive yourself eventually trickles on and impacts everything you do. So usually what I do, I work on their mindset. And I'll give an example. Like if a client of mine, she wants to advance her career and so I have clients who want, like maybe they're first line managers and they want to go to the next level, to a director or a second line manager. And we talk about first, okay, tell me about what have you done so far? What are you good at? So we kind of help a little bit with their confidence and appreciation to what they already do and value that they bring. And so they can see that actually a lot of the things they already do are already showing that they are capable as a leader, and they can probably give value at a higher level. And then we start thinking about, okay, if you have a challenge, think about what would you do if you were given that title.
Yeah.
Let's say someone already gave you the director title.
Yes.
What would you think? How would you operate? So I kind of train them to start thinking as if they are already there, whatever it is. I just gave an example of like career advancement, but it could be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So start to adapt the mindset of, okay, if you already got what you wanted,
Mm-hmm.
how would you behave? What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
And that is really impactful. And eventually, so when you get that mindset of, well, actually I can do this, I am capable, I'm bringing value, then you start showing more confidence.
Mm-hmm.
You become more brave as a leader. So you take more risks. You may do things that maybe no one asked you to, but you take more initiatives. You don't wait for permission.
Right.
And
like
that kind of impacts. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so practical and a good way to start if you're in a new role and you're overwhelmed with, those intrusive thoughts. And because I think they also can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't shift that mindset, then it will impact how you're perceived. And I think the beauty of this all is that it's in your control more than you might believe.
Definitely it is. And I'll give you just today I thought about a post that I'm going to write. So I'll give a totally different example. Like, we often tend to be very self-critical about ourselves as leaders.
Yes.
But I'll give an example. So my son have a problem with one of his wisdom tooth, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's been a roller coaster the last few days, and it still is, to identify what he has, do a research on different doctors and all that. And I've been like, I've been doing so many things, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So think about it. In your day-to-day life, if something happened to one of your kids or loved ones, what would you do to solve a problem? It could be medical, it could be something else. Mm-hmm. You would move mountains for your loved one, right? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, before I moved to the US with my family, I flew by myself to Denver. I've never been there. Uh-huh. And I had 1 week to find a place, and I negotiated on a price. So I did incredible things because I did it for my family and I had to do it. Mm-hmm. So why am I giving this example? Because when you think about what would you do if it was your kid, you appreciate how much power you have, how much you can achieve, even when chances seem slim, or when there is high pressure, or I don't know, you have no idea how to solve a problem. You figure this out. Yeah. Because it's your son, it's your daughter. You'll do everything for them, right?
Right.
So if you do that, why wouldn't you be able to do that in the workplace?
Yeah. I love that, because the message is you already have it in you.
Yeah.
You do. It's just that now change your paradigm of thinking about how you apply this internal skill and fortitude and strength in the direction you want it to go. When, if it was for family, you hear women literally moving cars off of children and finding this, superhuman strength, that it's all, deep within us.
Yeah. Wow, it's been a real treat speaking with you today, Therese. So before we end our conversation today, because I feel like we can go forever.
I do too.
What is one thing you want to end us with? Like whatever is on your mind that maybe I haven't touched on and you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah. I think we didn't get to talk about this enough, but I would say that, if you're going to develop skills, mindset first, but I would also say the skill of listening. We touched on it a little bit before, of you can show up with so much credibility and confidence when you're a really good listener and able to demonstrate your wisdom in the shape of questions. And so if you're feeling like I'm still new. I still have to learn. There's so much, I'm on this huge learning curve. Let go of the expectation that you're going to know everything at once and focus on how can I show up as a really good learner and listener in my next meeting.
Love that. This is incredible. I actually think that active listening and empathy are two of the most important things for leaders.
100% agree. It all boils down to that.
Yeah. So, Therese, how can our listeners find you? And don't worry to spell everything because I put all the URLs.
Well, great. A couple things. One of the things I'd love for your listeners to have immediately is a free tool. And if they go to the Facilitation Advantage, that's the name of the book, for the website by the same name, thefacilitationadvantage.com, they can get a free little assessment to quickly see how well do I show up on these skills related to facilitation. And I think what it can help your listeners do is don't try to do everything at once. Like pick one thing. So maybe it is mindset, maybe it's presence, maybe it's subject matter, how I tailor that. Because I also don't think we should ever set ourselves up for failure and think we should be perfect at everything. So that's one thing, is just see how you stack up. And then we have workshops, we have little targeted sessions for teams, for technical teams that now are going to be responsible for leading a lot of meetings or Kaizen events. And so there's workshops, there's quick start sessions, and then there's one-on-one coaching.
Wonderful. Is everything there? Thank you so much for being here with me today, Therese.
It was a joy.
Likewise. Thank you so much for listening for the episode with Therese Miclot. Before you go, I want to share what's going to happen next week. So next week on From a Woman to a Leader, I sit down with Cecile Peterkin, and she's a leadership coach with over 20 years of experience, and she shares the powerful lessons her father taught her about emotional strength and leading with grace. We dive into why emotional management is a non-negotiable skill for women in leadership, how to deal with imposter syndrome, and what true legacy really means. It's raw, it's inspiring, and it's a reminder that you don't have to lead like anyone else to be powerful. So if you enjoyed this episode, I have a favor to ask you. Please don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share it with a friend who needs it. And I'll see you next week on Wednesday, as always, with Cecile. You definitely don't want to miss this episode. So have a wonderful day and see you next week. Bye.